Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Well, Williams Knife Life beat me to the punch with this knife, and from what I understand, Jolly Peanut has also done reviews on this knife. It is the Baron Son Gold Rush Bowie. Well, it's obviously by Baron Son, and you see it comes in a really big box with artwork on it. This is the large one. I think they also have a medium and a small Gold Rush Bowie. I don't know if they're all called Gold Rush Bowies or not. But talk about a big box. When this came to the door, I was kind of shocked because I got it through Chicago Knife Works, and shipping was free because the knife was over $100. And I'm still trying to figure out how in the world am I going to display a box that big, because that takes up like a wall. That might be something that ends up in over the bar at Skip the Show's Volcano Club, so he can show that off there, because he's got a nice little knife collection. He's got a wall of knives by his bar now, so that's pretty cool. But Skip, he's not getting the knife. This knife is staying in the collection. There's a couple reasons I ended up picking up this knife at the current moment. Let me first get down to the most personal reason I finally ended up picking one of these up. I've been looking at getting one for years, but finally decided to do it. Partly because I'm working on a video on fixed blade knives from around the world, and I needed a proper American Bowie knife. But the reason I finally decided to pick this one up here and now is because of Daisy, the cat. I bought this when she was still ill and not doing well, but I knew she was going to be passing soon. I knew I was going to have to put her down, and I wanted something to remember her by, so I basically took a cue from Steve from Patty's Potato Peelers and decided to purchase a knife in memory of Daisy, and this is the knife that I picked up for Daisy. So this knife will possibly even get her name engraved onto the wood, or it might get stamped into the sheath or something like that. And I think that's kind of fitting for something like this, because I remember you hear about, like, in the old days where the frontiermen would, like, name their rifle or name their knives and stuff like that, like Jim Bowie's Iron Maiden or Iron Lady or whatever his knife was called. Well, this knife is going to be Daisy. So, and that's the way I'm going to honor her and remember her, is with this knife, which is the Baron Son large Gold Rush Bowie. Now, with that said, let's move on to this knife specifically, and a little bit about Bowie knives in general, the American Bowie knives in general. Now, these days, any big knife is just called a Bowie knife. This is not what the original Bowie knife looked like. No one knows exactly what it looked like, but chances are it was nothing more than a big, heavy-bladed butcher knife, possibly without even a guard on it. So a lot of people would look at it and go, you can't fight with that knife. Well, apparently you could, because he did, and he won with it. Of course, he was fighting a guy who was using a cane sword, and we don't know how long the blade was on the cane sword. And any case, the knife made it became famous, and basically any large knife started being called a Bowie knife. But typically, the ones that were more commonly referred to as a Bowie knife was ones that had a really big blade, 10, 12 inches, maybe 14 inches, something like that. They would have a full cross guard, and then they would have some kind of handle, and usually it was bent at the end here. The thing is most of those Bowie knives that you were running into back in the 1830s through, say, the 1880s and such were not made in the United States. Most of them were coming out of Sheffield, England, and you look back at it, and those were the Sheffield Bowies. and a lot of them, especially in the Civil War, you had Confederate and Federal troops carrying Sheffield Bowie knives, and some of them actually had sayings on them, and it was funny because the factories in Sheffield, one day they'd be making Bowie knives for the Confederate forces, and the next day they'd be making them for the Union forces, and then they would just ship them off on different ships heading either to the southern states or the northern states, and making a mint selling knives in America. And the ones that they sold were the ones that had the full cross guard and the kind of a grip like this, and then big heavy blade. The blades were not always clip blades, but that's what most people think of today. A lot of them were actually more of a spear point, and some of them were basically a big old long triangle. A lot of people refer to those as like an Arkansas toothpick. These are also sometimes referred to as a toothpick, and that's just a play on words and such. But anyway, the one I have here is probably one of the more iconic American Bowie knives, and this is started off as the Western number 49 Bowie, and so it's made by the Western Knife Company or Western Cutlery, and eventually those Western knives were actually being made by Camillus, and when Western folded and or Camillus bought it out or something of that nature, I have to get all that figured out. I'm sure Stuart Harvey or a couple other people will straighten me out on that part. But I know eventually Camillus ended up owning Western. This probably after the Coleman days. This knife ended up, when they stopped making Camillus knives, they ended up making these, when they stopped making Western knives, they started making the same knife as the number 49 Western Bowie by Camillus, and so it would be stamped Camillus. And then when Camillus went under, Baronson apparently got the tool and dies for the Western Bowies, the number 49 Western Bowie from Camillus, and this is it. It's the same knife as what Camillus used, and the same basic knife that Western was using. And the sheath, the Dangler sheath, is still the same as what Western used to do. This particular one uses 12C 27M Sandvik stainless steel, a brass guard, brass pins, as you can tell, full Tang construction, and a Cocobolo handle. So all in all, a really good knife. And it is well made. It is very solid. Yes, there is some crudity to it with the handles and everything. And, you know, it's not like it's soldered around the edge here with the guard or anything. And the guard is really big, which so is the Western, but it definitely protects your hand well. And as you saw with Williams Knife Life, the sheath is pretty tight. It's getting better. I've been using it for about a month now, going in and out just to get the sheath to loosen up a bit. But the sheath also is, if you notice, maybe you'll see it there, very close. The tip, if you were to push it all the way down, the tip actually would be hitting the stitching on the bottom. And as you can tell here, the sheath does not, or the knife does not go all the way into the sheath. So it's a little short. Not a problem though. And the snap, Williams pointed this out also. The snap is done correctly, because when you open it, not only does it sort of pop out of the way, not to mention you can turn it all the way around, so you don't even need to have the strap in place. It's not on the side of the cutting edge, so that works out real well too. And it's a really good Dangler sheath. So the only problem it doesn't have is a hole here, so you would have to try and find a way to stitch a new piece of leather on the back here to make a loop if you wanted to tie it down to your leg. But really the Dangler here means that it should be hanging freely, which is pretty good. All in all, it's really well made. Now, as for the name of the knife, the Gold Rush Bowie. I think Bear & Son was pulling a quick one with us on this one. And I think the reason they chose the name Gold Rush Bowie is because it's kind of like paying homage to Western, because this is the 49 Bowie, the Western 49, number 49 Bowie knife. And so it's a 49er. San Francisco, Gold Rush, 49ers. Yeah, it is a play on words, but it's a pretty cool idea, and I can see why they did that. So this isn't necessarily a knife that the prospectors would have been carrying, but you can see why they named it that. It's a pretty cool idea, I think. And if that isn't why they named it that, boy, did they blow it, because that's the reason they should have named it that. When I first saw, Gold Rush Bowie and the picture here, I was thinking Alaska, but no, that's like California, Sutter's Mill, that kind of thing. And it's the Western Gold Rush Bowie, Western 49 Bowie. Really cool knife, though. I'm glad I picked it up. Eventually it will have the name Daisy on there. And the other reason I picked it up is because, well, I needed a knife to represent the United States in my knives from around the world. And I think when you think about when other people around the world think of America and knives, this is probably the knife they think of, the Bowie knife, even though it originated in England. But hey, so did a lot of Americans. Anyway, there you have it, my my Bear & Son Gold Rush Bowie. A Western Bowie, though. Now, before I get to the slides, I want to talk a little bit about the pointy end of this knife. And if you notice, this portion is not sharp. That's because this is a swedge. If it was sharp, such as it is on my Camillus fighting knife here, this portion is actually sharp, and this is known as a false edge. If the top portion of the front of the blade is sharp, then it's a false edge. If it is unsharpened, but it has the swedge going on there, this is just a swedge. A swedge is unsharpened, a false edge is sharpened. Now, there's a couple reasons why you would just use a swedge instead of a sharpened portion here. Obviously, if it was sharp here, it would pierce better. But if it was also sharp here, the point would be finer and more prone to breaking. So by using a swedge up here, you have a lot more strength at the very tip of the blade, and you have less opportunity for the tip of the blade to break. So it's a trade-off when you go for a false edge up here as opposed to just a swedge. The swedge will be stronger than if it was a false edge. A false edge would mean that the tip would be a little more prone to breaking, and I think that's why this knife has the swedge as opposed to a false edge. In any case, with that said, let's move on to the slides. let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.